Okay, welcome everybody to this week's episode on Marketing Madness. Today I'm very fortunate to have Karan with me. He's going to share with us on our series on storytelling. And welcome to the channel that's for CEOs and founders that want to grow their businesses and look at what's happening around marketing, also old processes like storytelling that basically is so important in getting your message across. And the heart is, how do you let more people know about what problem you're solving in the world? Because founders and entrepreneurs and CEOs, they're all about solving problems for people and adding value to the world. And Karan, thank you very much for joining me today. Really looking forward to our discussion. We had a chat previously, and what should have been a quick chat turned into a long discussion. We'll try and keep it succinct as we go on. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited. Our chat did go on. It was great to find some shared interests around fantasy storytelling, especially. So yeah, I'm very excited for today.
Yeah, thank you for your time and joining us. But tell us a little bit about yourself. This is where the storytelling begins. Tell us your story.
I have a slightly unusual career, Dennis. I started my career working in finance, very quickly realized that I didn't want to be sat behind a screen all day crunching numbers. So I found myself moving into the world of talent acquisition. So this is where I was really bashing the phones 50 to 100 calls a day. This is where I developed my understanding of how to communicate with people. When you're speaking to hundreds of people a week, you start to understand the kind of nuances of how each individual person speaks and connects. And it was here where I developed my early stages of extracting stories. I was speaking to candidates. I had to know more about them and their skills, and I was then selling these candidates ineffectively to my clients. It was then I grew tired of the sales side of things. I moved into a more strategic role. I was a psychometric interviewer for 5 years. I worked at a large IT service provider, and my job was to build up their sales team across Europe. So I had 5 VPs, 30 million pound P&Ls, looking for the best sales staff across Europe. And I was the buffer between my team of recruiters and the VPs. So we did psychometric interviewing. So we were hiring specific personality traits. Good salespeople, they tell you what they want you to hear. So it was my job to really dig below the surface and develop those techniques of how to extract stories that people had, but perhaps didn't know how to communicate. And I think that's the biggest thing with storytelling. We all have stories, we just don't know how to tell them. I did that for 5 years. I really developed my skill of understanding the human psyche when it comes to stories, how to get a message across to the right person. And especially for founders and CEOs, knowing your ICP is very important. How do you position your story to them? Then COVID happened. Lots of things changed for everybody. I picked up a camera and I just started to teach myself photography. I taught myself videography. I bought lights. I bought the audio. I taught myself how to edit, and I just started telling stories, this time just for a different audience. One thing led to another, and I've spent the last 5 years making documentaries for the Premier League. I've interviewed some of the biggest football stars on the planet, and on paper, it looks like 2 very different jobs. But ultimately, the skills are the same. Whether it was in talent acquisition or documentaries, I was interviewing people, extracting their stories, and then crafting that into a narrative. The only difference was, instead of selling into VPs, I was doing it for a global audience.
And I think that's what we are getting excited about, is the same skill set of connecting with people on a human level is what you're leveraging in lots of different places. So if you're a CEO talking about what you do in front of a large audience, or in a network like the leadership boardroom, where you're standing in a boardroom in front of other CEOs, then what you're doing is you're creating those human connections through story. And it's in the sports field, in the business field, all across the whole range of things. It's telling those stories. I read a very interesting article where they said that there's a large part of the brain that basically fires up as soon as there's stories being told in YouTube videos. So, when the teaching is going on, there's a certain part of the brain that's learning. But as soon as somebody jumps into, let me tell you a story to illustrate this, a whole bunch of the different parts of the brain, prefrontal cortex, all the rest of it fires up because we're wired for storytelling.
We are.
We're wired to make connections
We are. And
through storytelling.
it's because we've done it since our existence. As soon as we started to congregate in tribes, storytelling was at the foundation of everything we did. Every evening we'd sit around the fire and we'd create stories. We'd look at the stars. It's as early as that. We looked at the stars and we made up stories of what we observed, the changes in the sky. So we have been doing it. It's in our DNA, and we storytell every day. Every time you recall a memory and you share that, you are storytelling. We do it unknowingly. It's just about understanding how to do it in the most effective way. And it's particularly powerful for CEOs and founders as leaders. If you're able to harness this skill, it can have a massive impact on your business. And we've seen it with some of the biggest and most famous leaders. Steve Jobs, great storyteller.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Great storyteller.
And it's no coincidence that he was able to turn Apple into what it is today.
Exactly, because he could tell a story. You could buy into it and get excited about the products because it was bound within a story. And it's not just the external. It's not just about letting the world know about what problem you solve as a company. It's also internally with your teams and the people that you work with and your other stakeholders. Selling that dream and getting them on board is all about effective storytelling.
He was good at transferring emotion. Telling us about emotional movement. How do I transfer the emotion I have inside of me with that story to you so that we can build a connection? That's what storytelling is, an emotional transfer. And that's how we build connection. What I do now is I work exclusively with CEOs and founders and leaders to help them leverage storytelling for their businesses. And as you mentioned, it's not only when it comes to content. I think this view we have right now is that content kind of sits in silo and it's just there as part of marketing. But storytelling, it weaves into the fabric of your business. The clearer your story as a CEO, as a founder, as a business leader, the clearer then it is for everybody else, sales, marketing, hiring, partnerships, to understand that story and then articulate that, whether it's internally or externally as well. So that's very important. The clearer the story, the easier it is for the rest of the team to be able to then spread and share that story too. So I work with my founders and CEOs on building not only their business strategy when it comes to storytelling, but also their personal brand. Because as a founder now or a CEO, if you're not in front of the camera, you're already putting the business at a disadvantage. 82% of prospects are more likely to buy from a business if they can see the founder or CEO online. Our buying habits have changed now as people. We don't spend money the same way we used to. We like to know that there is a person behind the brand that we're buying from. The everyday kind of goods, fine, but if you're investing money into something, unless you can see the person, you don't immediately have that connection to that brand. What we'll do is we'll see something, we'll go and we'll research. We're not just buying straight away now because we're just bombarded with ads, aren't we? So we want to see more, feel more, know more. That's why the brands that are doing best and the people and CEOs and leaders that are doing great work at the moment, they're the ones that are at the forefront of their business.
And they're visible. People want to buy from people. They don't just want to buy from companies. And we're seeing the same thing on our side. We've got a specific product that we developed around your personal brand or story or what you stand for, positioning you as a key person of influence. I'm a big fan of Daniel Priestley that talks about the key person of influence and what their role is to shine the light on what the company is doing and making a place where people can connect emotionally to that company because it's around a person. For instance, Richard Branson has a huge amount of followers on his personal account, but only about 10% on his company's account of followers. Him as person has so much more followers than actually the companies that it's actually about that he talks about so many times. Because people want to buy from people. No, I fully agree with you. And we're seeing the same thing when we're working with CEOs to create their own website, create content on YouTube that then feeds into LinkedIn. Those are the ones generating leads.
I was speaking with a client the other day and they have a law firm. And that client's name, she's the partner on the law firm, right? So we were talking about their strategy and she was showing me the LinkedIn pages, the company page. And I said, what about your page? And she's like,
exactly.
You post. And I was like, but your name is literally on the business. So if I'm engaging with you as a client, I'd like to see who you are. You run that business. You are the partner. It's great that I can speak to the paralegals within your team, but I want to know from you, because I'm investing a lot of money. It's quite a sensitive topic we have here. I'd like to know what you've done previously with your clients, because that will give
Exactly.
more trust and confidence to know that I'm working with the right person. So it's really important now more than ever. And I think people have this misconception around content that you need to be funny, you need to be loud, you need to be entertaining. And I notice with a lot of the CEOs and founders that I work with that they don't want to do that. They feel like it's a performance. And the important thing to remember now is we buy into authenticity. We've all seen so much content out there over the years that we can see past the performance. Ultimately, if you want someone to buy into you and your business, it's really important that you come across as genuine. But also, if you want this to be sustainable over the long term, if this is genuinely going to become part of your strategy, it cannot be something that you're not comfortable with, because it won't be sustainable. So that's really important as well, to accept that you are going to be yourself and you're not going to perform, and that's okay, because you will then attract the right people.
Yeah, very true. And I think the misconception there is that you have to become an influencer.
Yes.
And I think that's the wrong way of approaching it. It's not becoming an influencer. It's becoming a trusted voice for your niche or your specific audience. They didn't want to listen to influencers. And I find influencers annoying myself, because it's show and it's not authentic and it's not a human on the other side. It's what they want to put in front, and they want to entertain. And that's not what you're going after. You're going after that if people are searching for a problem, that your content that you generate is basically shown to them.
You want to be the
because
authority in your space.
Exactly.
As you mentioned. It's really important that you are seen to be the authority in your space. And like you said, you want to be searchable to the algorithms. And I think we're changing now, where we're shifting more from a social media into an interest media. I think people are growing more tired of just being shown what the algorithm wants to show. So people are using these as search engines now. And also with the LLMs, ChatGPT, Claude, and so on, people are putting their pain points and questions into these programs and wanting answers. And this is where content has changed. You cannot just be so product focused and features focused. You need to be answering the questions that your ICP is asking. So that's why it's really important that you know your ICP as a CEO, as a founder, because your content strategy, your storytelling strategy will be defined by that person. And 90 to 95% of your content should answer the questions that they have, their pain points. Then you have that freedom of your 5-10% to show a bit more of your culture, your personality, and so on.
Exactly. I fully agree with you. And I think if you know your ideal customer profile and you know what their pain points are, that's when you can tell the stories that will show them how you solve those problems. And we normally suggest like a 70-30 split, where 70% needs to be about how you solve their problems for them or help them with solving their problems. And about 30% can be deep dives into your specific expertise. And that normally is a great way. But we're getting into YouTube strategy now. I think it's outside of this discussion. But yeah, I'm normally weary of talking about stuff that's not within that central positioning that you want to do.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to mess up the algorithm and doesn't know what you're talking about. As soon as you get political, once you've got a huge following, you can do that. But especially for starting out, you want to be laser focused on what
100%.
See, this is what I saw would happen. You and me would get off on a tangent and talk about that. So let's get back to topic. So storytelling. In your mind, just give the people that's listening to this some tips on what makes a great story. What elements goes into a great story? What's the process you take your clients through when crafting these stories?
I'll just strip it back and just look at how stories are told. So throughout TV, film, Hollywood, books, whatever, there is always a 3-act structure. Within any movie or any film that you watch, your opening act is the setup. That's where you introduce the characters. It's where you introduce the world. It's also where you introduce that turning point. of that protagonist. Then you have the confrontation. So these are the ups and downs. You'll always see it in movies and films. They're just about to overcome the problem and then something else happens. And now they're almost worse off than they were. And then they've got to really dig deep. And then you have the climax, Act 3. This is where you have that payoff. That's every single film, TV show, book will go through the same process.
Yeah, like all the rom-coms my wife makes me watch with her.
It's all the same. It's all the same.
Yeah.
But the reason it works is because, coming back to connection, we relate to these moments of the ups and the downs. It's when we can look at a story and think, okay, I've been through something similar. I can relate to that feeling, maybe not to the situation. Like, I don't know what it's like to jump out of a plane. But if you were telling me, Dennis, that you were 20,000 feet up looking out of the plane and you were scared for your life, but once you were on the ground, you really enjoyed it. And looking back, you would have regretted it if you didn't do that. I know what that means. I know what it's like to be scared. I know what it's like to overcome and put myself out of my comfort zone and then look back and say, I would have regretted it if I didn't do that. I can relate to the feeling, but maybe not the scenario. So a good story is able to draw you into the feeling, and that's how you build that connection. So when it comes to content, this is why what you spoke about earlier is very important. Problems. When you're telling a story as a CEO or a founder, think about who you want to receive that story. Who is your audience? Who is your ICP, as we've mentioned? What are the problems that they are going through? Because if they're feeling those problems, they are going to be feeling a sense of, there's going to be an emotional feeling attached to it, to that problem.
Yeah.
And
that connection.
Exactly. And then what you're doing there is moving them from A to B. They have that problem, the feeling of the problem. And then you're showing them how you or your business can take them from that problem through to the solution. So it's that emotional journey, again, that you've taken them on through your story. So a good story has to have change.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I always, when I bring it back to content and storytelling for your audience, my main thing that I say to my clients is show a prospective client what you have done with an existing client and the journey that you've taken them on. Because the chances are your existing client was once where your prospective client was and had similar pain points and challenges. So now, if I'm looking at the content you're producing, I can see what you've done with someone like me, and I can see the journey you've taken them on. So I might not be able to relate exactly to what's been done, but I can sense the change that's taken place, and that draws me in.
Yeah. And I think that's what we've seen as well. If you're generating, for instance, a case study on your website or on YouTube where you talk with a client or about a client that you worked with, if people can relate to the client and the position the client was in, I'm not getting enough leads. My business isn't growing because my marketing is ineffectual. I'm struggling. We can all, as founders and CEOs, relate to that feeling of what more can I do to get this business to grow? And then you go, you know what? I was working with this client and we set up a whole plan for them, and we created a YouTube strategy for them, and they started recording, and suddenly the leads started coming in and they felt relieved, and they didn't know what to do with all these clients. Now suddenly your audience can relate to all of the feelings of those progression and steps.
Exactly.
And I think you're absolutely right. If there's no progression, it's not an interesting story. It's all about the journey. If you take something like the hero's journey, where, okay, this is the setting, that first act you talked about. This is the setting. This is our protagonist. Maybe this is our hero that wants to solve something in the world. And he goes out and he tries and he fails miserably. And now he's sitting on the ground, doesn't know what to do. And the guide comes and shows him the way of doing it. And now he goes up against that dragon that he had to slay to be successful and to get to the outcome he wants to achieve. If you can position yourself as that guide or the solution of taking them from A to B, that's when you connect immediately.
That's the bulk of the story in TVs, film, whatever you do. It's act 2, it's the confrontation. That's the bulk of the story, because without, like you said, that change and progression, there is no story. Imagine Lord of the Rings. Frodo has to destroy the ring. Frodo destroys the ring. There's no story. without the confrontation, there's no story. So it's the same when it comes to CEO and founder led content. You need to be able to talk about the journey that you've taken existing clients on, but also your journey as a CEO and founder.
Mm.
It's equally important that you bring your own personality and your own experience into it, because you are a CEO or a founder for a reason. You're a founder if you've identified a problem that you want to solve. You're a CEO because you've worked your way up to that position. So in both instances, you have a story to tell.
Because you had to overcome.
Exactly. And it's really important that you do show that side of things as well, because what you don't want to fall into the pitfall of doing is only showing case studies, only showing the
Yeah.
client journeys. It's like, okay, great, but tell me about you. Again, now you're effectively selling, but you're doing it indirectly. But tell me about you as well as a person, your journey.
And that's where that connection.
Exactly. Like I know you probably want to raise your Series A, Series B and get your unicorn status as a founder. Great. But why did you start? What inspired you to do this? What passion do you have for solving this problem? It's really important that you do find that balance.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the work of Simon Sinek around start with why, then people connect to why are you doing this? It might, and I think people are tired of the answer being, I want money and power and status, like some politicians, but let's not get into that. I think this is why I love working with founder-led companies and CEOs that is passionate about the company and what they're doing and how they're changing the world in a positive way. It's because we get to tell awesome stories. Yeah, I think that's gold. I'm so inspired to call a few of my clients and say, listen, I know you're reluctant to get on YouTube, but we have to tell your story. You've got such a powerful story of overcoming the challenges that you faced personally. And people need to hear it.
This is the problem. We undervalue and downplay our success so much so that we just think it won't be valuable for anyone to hear. Because we live in this world where when you celebrate yourself, people label you as arrogant. There's a difference between sharing for the sake of showing off and sharing for the sake of helping or educating or inspiring. So I think part of it is just also accepting that I'm going to put this content out. People might view me in a certain way, but ultimately how they receive it is none of my problem. As long as my intention is clear and I have the right intention behind it and the information is accurate, that's all I can control. So it's just helping people have that kind of mental shift as well when it comes to being seen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what people respond to these days, that authenticity that we mentioned, is that moments of vulnerability. If you're sharing your story, which is deeply personal, and you're willing to put it out there because you believe so much in what you're doing in the world that you're willing to be vulnerable so that people can buy into it, that's when you have people that want to go, I want to work with this person because I either also believe in the cause or I just trust this person. They're not doing it just to twist my arm and to buy their products. They're doing it because they really want to leave the world a better place. We shouldn't be afraid to be a little bit vulnerable.
It's funny because there's this thing called the spotlight effect. I don't know if you've come across it, but it's when we think there's more lights on us and people are watching us more than they actually are. We forget when we put something out there on the internet, we think that it's going to be seen by 6-7 billion people. It might only be seen by 20, 30, but we just assume that everyone's watching everything we're doing. And it's a normal feeling because I think being vulnerable, again, I take it back to when we were living in tribes. When you were out there, you could be outcast, you could be isolated from the group, and that meant danger. So again, when you're putting yourself out there, we have that same feeling, that danger. It's actually a nervous system response. The nervous system stops us from doing these things because it's designed to protect us. And it senses fear and it senses danger when we're exposed, when we're vulnerable. But what happens is when you do it the first time and nothing bad happens, the nervous system learns that, okay, this was not as bad as I thought. So the next time you go to do it, it becomes easier and easier. And I'm sure you had that same feeling when you did that first podcast through to now. By now, it's normal. The system has been trained. And the same with me. When I go up and I speak or when I film content, I still don't like it. It's not the most comfortable feeling in the world having a light and camera in your face. But my nervous system has adapted and I no longer have that feeling of fear anymore. You still get nervous, maybe anxious, but it's not fear. And fear is often the
Yes.
thing that stops us from doing the things that we should be doing.
Exactly.
To any CEOs, any founders out there that haven't been on screen before, like when you go to do it, the feeling that you have is normal. So don't worry about that. Just focus on getting through that first one. When you turn up again, it will be slightly easier. And each time you get there, it will become easier until, it becomes normal.
Yeah. And I'd say you're going all Nike on them. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just get that first one.
You have to just do it. We can make excuses all day long, but the reality is, unless you take that first step, nothing will change. And the way the world is going, the way content is going, the way marketing is going, you cannot hide anymore. And I actually like to reframe it as a challenge. It's a challenge. It's a game. It's just another string to your bow. The work you're doing day to day around your products or services, this is just an additional part of that. It's not something that sits in silo or completely independent. It's actually just becomes part of your normal day-to-day work now.
Yeah. What I normally suggest, we normally create a content plan for 62 weeks. So a whole year's worth of content. And just half an hour in front of the camera, maybe an hour of prep. We do all the editing and help them with writing the content. But as soon as they can get through that initial fear of just sitting down, switching on the camera, switching on the audio, pressing record, and just talking about what they're passionate about anyway. You do it 1, 2, 3 times, and then it's part of your routine, and that's gold. There's so much you can do with that because people want to connect to those that are in leadership in those companies, because now I've got an emotional connection with that company.
Yeah.
Okay. As we suspected, we're half an hour down and we're still going strong. I think let's wrap this one up. We can always have another one in future. I'd love to continue this conversation where we can dive into more detail on some of the points that we mentioned. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and your journey and telling us your story. We really appreciate it. It's great to see how you're also changing the world in a positive way. And please, we'll have Karan's contact details in our description for this podcast, so that if you want to continue this conversation with him and see how he can help you, you can do that. And just keep on telling great stories and don't be afraid. I think the motto is not that many people care, and those that are negative don't matter anyway. I'll get that quote for next time, but that's the bottom line. Just go out there, do it, tell your story, and those that will resonate with it will want to work with you and continue those relationships.
Exactly.
And so Karan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate giving me the platform, and echo your words. What's the worst that can happen?
Exactly. There are a few things, but we'll stay away from them.